Who do you want to talk about first?
Mitch Sherman, The Athletic.
He can play. And we need people that can play.
And we'll never be royal. Let me live that fantasy. Oh.
Mitch Sherman, The Athletic. On The Connor Happer Show. On 1620, The Zone.
He can play.
All right, we're now joined on the 42 Degrees of Source hotline by Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Connor. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Any final thoughts on the Royals? This is it. No more questions to start the interview about the Royals. Yeah.
I think we covered it last week. I don't have any final thoughts.
Good.
I'm happy they made it as far as they did.
Me too. Now that we've had a week to digest it, it's like, okay. All right. I guess I could live with that. What I cannot live with is getting my postseason shirt the day after that they were eliminated. And by the way, I am sending that shirt back. I'm keeping the hat. I'm sending the shirt.
I'm happy that you're returning it. You got to stand up for yourself in that situation.
I would never wear that shirt. It would be too hard for me to wear. Okay. Where are you at on the Indiana hype train? Are you on? Are you driving the train that goes against that train? Where do you stand on Indiana as a, one of the top representatives of the Big Ten Conference?
As the week goes on, I'm convincing myself more and more that it's a hype train. Like this is how it goes. I spent last week convinced that this is a matchup that doesn't favor Nebraska, and as this week goes on, I've looked at it and felt like, oh, okay, well, they might be okay here. They might be okay here. I'm still wary of what's going to happen when Nebraska gets out there on Saturday, but I see scenarios, definitely see scenarios that can work out well for Nebraska, in large part because Indiana has not experienced this. I think it might. It's possible. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible that a lot of this has happened too fast for the Hoosiers.
That's why it seems. I mean, it does seem that way to me. Now, it's possible that a team like that could start hot and kind of ride Nebraska did it in 2016, right? They started off 7-0 and kind of rode the coattails of it. They had some miserable losses, but ultimately ended the season 9-3, which in today's terms, you're probably talking about one game away from making yourself a reasonable, viable candidate for the college football playoff.
Yeah, although I don't know that team would have been one game away from a 12-team playoff. It depends how your 9-3 looks. And Nebraska had one game that year that was against the legitimate top 5 team, and it lost 62-3. So
okay, interesting. So let's think about this for a second. So they went 9-3 in 2016, but let's just say instead of losing to Wisconsin, they beat Wisconsin. Everybody else, everything else stays the same. They go 10-2. They have a top 10 Wisconsin win in their back pocket, but they got absolutely bludgeoned by Ohio State, and they got beat pretty good by Iowa as well. The rest of the games are wins. Is that a viable playoff team?
No, I don't think it's a playoff team.
Because I think the formula that Indiana's probably hoping for this year.
It's a committee deciding this thing, and I don't think they look at that 62-3 result kindly, and also ending the season with a loss. No, I think you're looking at 7 at-large teams, and I think they pretty much in any year you're going to find 7 teams with a better resume than that.
Yeah, I would think so too. But that's 10-2 has kind of always been put out there as the number, like, hey, get to 10-2, and you're going to give yourself an opportunity, or you at least put yourself in the running. Now, then you get to start having your resume torn apart, which would not be advantageous if you have a 62-3 loss on your resume.
That may be Indiana this year. You never know.
Yeah, would not be good. All right, Mitch Sherman of The Athletic is with us. So you wrote about this on The Athletic for today, but Dylan Raiola and what not only what he's done statistically through his first 6 games, which I like has been pretty. It's been good. They haven't turned the football over, but generally like kind of pedestrian. sort of numbers, good numbers for obviously for a freshman. But I think, and from your story, it's pretty clear what he brings to the table and what he has brought to the table. It's been the biggest factor for this team has been sort of his steady hand and the leadership qualities that he has shown so far this year. Like, what do you think is that expanded upon in the second half of the season where the games become a little bit more difficult?
When the season started and I saw the way that Raiola was front and center with the way that how he wanted to lead, I wondered if some of it was forced and it was a little bit artificial, and he was acting the way that he felt like he should act as the product of some NFL style training. And you can watch those players on Sunday and say, okay, hey, this is how Matthew Stafford does it, and this is how Patrick Mahomes does it. Like, I should walk in here as a freshman and be that guy. And I wondered if there would be an element of, hey, you ought to wait your turn among some of his teammates, especially since this is an older group. But I was wrong on thinking. It wasn't like I had determined that, but I was that's not the way that it's been. I'm fully convinced of that 6 games into the season, that the way that he's worked, and then there's the whole history with Nebraska, but I don't think that factors into it. I think it's his, the genuine qualities that he's shown in coming in early, staying late, working hard, watching film. Just it has won over. If he didn't win over his teammates in August, he's won them over early in this season, and they are comfortable with him in this role. He's balanced it very well, because I don't think he's trying to be the player who necessarily speaks for Nebraska at every critical moment. But he is becoming the face of this team.
Comfort and trust. It's such a big thing, especially for a quarterback and for a freshman. It's just hard to have that really under your belt without playing a game. But now he's played 6 of them. And so I wonder if these things, like the continued trust of his teammates, the continued trust of his coaching staff, I wonder how that manifests itself from a playing perspective in the final 6 games of the year. Like, I'm kind of waiting for him, for them to let him cut it loose a little bit. There hasn't been much of that so far this year because of the positions that Nebraska's been in, but maybe if a game gets close late, or maybe if they're down by a touchdown or two, all of a sudden you start to see like the real upside and the talent come forth.
Yeah, they haven't been behind in a game by more than 3 or 4 points as the game went on. I don't. There have been games that have been tied. They lost the Illinois game by 7, but in that, I don't believe they were down 7 against Illinois early, but that's it. 7 is the largest deficit that they've faced. And I do think if you get down 2 scores, that you have to start playing it, depending on the time of the game. But even in the first half, you start playing it a little bit different, and you start to take a few more risks. And I think that they've grown comfortable enough. And by they, I mean Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rhule have grown comfortable enough with Raiola that they would feel good about putting him in a spot where it's on him. Now, how does the defense respond to that? And do they send pressure? And does that rattle Dylan? And does the offensive line and the backs, do they do everything that they've got to do in that situation? That remains to be seen. And that moment's going to come, and it'll be interesting to see how Nebraska handles that as an entire offense. Cause it's not all at that point, he has to rely on people around him to give him time and make catches and things like that. But I think he's ready for it. And I think the team will trust in him if that moment comes, just because of everything that they've seen on and off the field through his short time at Nebraska.
Defensively, Mitch, the challenge is pretty tall against Indiana. We've seen just a couple examples in the 18 games that Matt Rhule has been the head coach here, of them playing against offenses like this that are explosive, that are efficient, that like to probably put it in the air more than they like to run the football on the ground. And they like to spread you out a little bit. What's the challenge for Nebraska's defense on Saturday? And And are they up to it? Right? I mean, they've made a lot of their hay so far this year against offenses that you wouldn't necessarily write home about. This one's a little bit different.
Yeah, if you can start to produce some 3-and-outs, then I think you control the tempo of the game, and this is the kind of game that you want to control that, because Nebraska and Indiana, I think, are going to have different game plans with in terms of like the number of possessions that they'd like to see in the game and just where the score gets at the end. So it's a big key, I think, for Nebraska to find a way. And Nebraska's been very good in the first portions of games. Now, we remember a couple recently where they allowed first quarter touchdowns, but it's 2 first quarter touchdowns in the last 13 games, if you can believe that, is all that Tony White's defense has allowed. And then in the second quarter, they've outscored opponents 65-3 this season. So those are like some kind of behind the scenes things that I've started to look at as this week's gone along when I consider the matchup of the Indiana offense against the Nebraska defense, which I think is going to determine this game more than the other side, that perhaps favor Nebraska, but that's all blown out of the water if it's 14-0, 8 minutes into the game.
What do we do with that second quarter stat? I don't even know what to make of that. But it's an insane number.
Yeah, you can look at it and you can say, okay, that's when you've got to really coach, and that's when the script from the week is done, and you're seeing how these teams adjust on the fly. But you can say the same thing about the second half, and after you go in and make adjustments in the locker room, and that hasn't gone obviously as well for Nebraska. Yeah, second quarter of a game, I don't know. I'd have to sit down and think a little bit more about that, and maybe talk to some people about why Nebraska's had success in the second quarters of games, if that continues for another week or two.
Yeah. Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. All right, Mitch, we'll let you go. Appreciate you taking the time as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks, Connor.
Mitch Sherman from The Athletic and the Locked On Nebraska podcast, which you could hear daily.
A very good podcast, wherever you get your podcast.
Some say that. That's Josh's opinion.
I've heard it's on TikTok now.
Well, not the whole podcast. It's not like one of those
you don't
movie aggregator sites where you could just like watch movies. But yeah, there's some clips that are floating around out there. There's some clips were on TikTok. It's weird scrolling through TikTok and then you see yourself. Yeah. Very odd. We have some news out of Tempe, Arizona.
This is big. Hold on to your butts, people.
Here is a Pete tweet. ASU coach Kenny Dillingham announces that starting quarterback Sam Leavitt will not start this coming week against Cincinnati. So that means Jeff Sims will get the start.
Yes.
He played against Utah.
He did.
For a little while this past weekend. Jeff Sims has returned to being a starting quarterback in Tempe, Arizona this time. What a run for Jeff Sims.
They are a 5.5-point dog on the road at Cincinnati. What else can we bet on in this?
Oh, can you do any interception props or anything like that?
No.
All right.
Not that I see.
Jeff Sims, in replacing Leavitt last week against Utah, went one rushing attempt for 2 yards
and a touchdown,
right? And one passing completion in 2 attempts for 13 yards.
That number has jumped to 6.5 since I read it 12 seconds ago.
Also, in the week 1 game against Wyoming, Sims ran for 3 carries and 15 yards. Those are his stats this year, but he takes over the starting job after his 3 years at Georgia Tech, 1 year at Nebraska, now at ASU. Exciting. That's good football.
Great times there in the desert.
Appointment television, as Black Cat said to us just before. Mustache Adam writes in,
Hi, Mustache.
Just like Skyline Chili or his Amigos value meal, you could expect Sims to cough it up versus the Bearcats. He's one of the easiest guys in Husker history that I feel like people have been able to make jokes about. People love making jokes about Jeff Sims. It was too easy, right? He was only here for a very, very short amount of time. and it worked out unanimously horribly, right? There was no case for it to, like, it's not like there was a person in the back saying, actually, I thought that went well. No.
And
he got replaced by a Nebraskan. It was the first year of the coach. Like, he's maybe the easiest quarterback to just write off in Husker history.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember him really getting in front of the media ever to like.
Not much. He did go to media day.
He did, but it wasn't even like, oh, he's a nice guy. Like, I don't know anything about him. He never.
Yeah, no, he didn't say much.
Hey, let's talk to the Lincoln Journal-Star, and they'll do like a softer side of Jeff Sims.
No, we never got that
to kind of turn the narrative around. Nope, nothing.
Yeah. Text from the 402.
Hi, 402.
Please say Jeff Sims is a turnover machine in your Gus Johnson voice.
What would that sound like, Connor?
We got to go back. Well, we actually have evidence of this. Because remember in the Colorado game last year, they got to take this guy out.
That's right.
He's killing him. Sims coughed it up again.